There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Weiser.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, I'm down in Jupiter, Florida for a few days, so you see the white background. That's indicative of the southern location for Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. A little hot down here now, but I never complain being down here because it's super beautiful. And I'll be going back to New York probably in a couple of days, but it's a pleasure to be down here. Anyway, folks, a lot of things going on with this Ruby Franke case and Jodi Hildebrandt. And I predict as this case moves forward, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to involve more and more people because you don't have a case at this level without so many people being involved in it, so many people knowing about it, so many people, enablers, if you will. What do I mean by that? People that knew about this, yet turned a blind eye to it. And here's your two protagonists on, Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke, right up on there on the screen. Probably at a better time when they're laughing. However, this case is nothing to laugh about, folks. You know, when the police responded to Ivins, Utah, and of course this is the home here, and I don't live in this part of Utah, but I mean I have a pretty good eye for real estate, and this home to me looks like it's a $3 or $4 million home. Just judging by where it is, the construction of it, the size of it. It looks more like a compound than a home. It's extremely big. So when police responded to Ivins, Utah at the home of Jodi Hildebrandt, they were there to investigate, of course, reports of suspected child abuse. They found an emaciated 12-year-old victim who told police that Jodi Hildebrandt tied them up with a rope and put cayenne pepper in their wounds. That's the first I've ever heard in my whole entire police career of someone putting cayenne pepper on wounds. Is that some new method? I don't know. I've never heard it. The victim then informed officers that Jodi put the ropes on their ankles and wrist, and that they use cayenne pepper and honey to dress the wounds. That was from an August 31st search warrant from the Santa Clara-Ivins Police Department. The mother, of course, is Ruby Franke. And both her and Jodi Hildebrandt, of course, were arrested that day for 6 counts each of aggravated child abuse. The warrants gave new insight into the police response on the day both women were arrested. According to the warrants, Franke's child was tied to the ground with rope, had a cayenne pepper and honey paste smeared in their wounds, and duct tape was used to bind both the child and dress the lacerations. Police also found 2 sets of handcuffs, rope and duct tape in the Hildebrandt's home, detailed in the warrant. I mean, this is just beyond belief that something like this could happen in this day and age. And the thing that's amazing to me is how long has it's been going on, and the amount of actual reports that were made to DCFS in regards to this family, and what precluded them from taking action. That is a question that I think many of us have. Well, why did they not take action? Patricia Siebold, cayenne pepper equals a new form of evil. You got that right. You got that right. Where the hell did that come from? You know? And the one thing about crimes like this is that sometimes the people that are involved in it are highly educated, affluent, as in this case, and supported by powerful institutions that are feeding them, in the case of Jodi Hildebrandt, feeding them clients, feeding this monster, this monstrous woman, feeding her clients into her practice that is abusive in every way. That gentleman on the screen, you're seeing Jodi Hildebrandt, and he's a man named Adam Steed, who went to Jodi Hildebrandt for marriage counseling. And not only did she give him poor advice, but she destroyed his marriage. I mean, that's according to him. But we have bigger fish to fry right now. What is going to happen here? Let me just play a little bit of the news report in regards to this cayenne pepper ordeal here. I'll put it up on the screen here.
Release search warrants revealed new details of what happened following the arrest of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt.
Fox 13 News reporter Spencer Joseph is following this case of the YouTube star and Utah mom and her business partner.
Good afternoon. Yes, we've been able to obtain these 3 search warrants thanks to our Fox 13 assignment desk team. And I'm going to kind of go through parts of each of them. So we go through exactly what happened after police arrived. So we'll start here. This search warrant is specifically for anything used to bind the children. So you could see all of this highlighted right here is exactly what police were able to obtain through this search warrant. And it contains things like Scotch tape and rope. Now, to shine some light on this, I want to read directly from the affidavit for this particular search warrant because it really shines some light on the exact moments following the police arriving. So it says, quote, medical personnel removed the duct tape, located open wounds. The victim informed officers and medical personnel that the wounds were from the rope that was used to tie the victim to the ground. The victim then informed the officers that Jodi put the ropes on their ankles and wrists and that they used cayenne pepper and honey to dress those wounds. Now, the victim told officers that 2 other siblings were in the home when he left, a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. So that is basis of the first search warrant. These other 2 search warrants are specifically about technology. So you can see actually right here, several MacBooks and iPhones have been taken possession of. And that's not just to talk about the communication between Ruby and Jodi. It's for another reason. I'll read that out directly too. It basically says, quote, it's also to obtain any possible videos or audio recordings that would have caught any abuse or injuries sustained from the abuse. So very interesting developments in this case, very intriguing. We're continuing to go through these documents. And I mentioned that honey and cayenne pepper used to treat the wounds. And it does say in Jodi Hildebrandt's bathroom, they did locate 2 medical gauze dressings near a cayenne pepper and honey paste. So the children were saying that that's what their wounds were dressed with. We're going to continue to go through these documents and come back at 5 o'clock. But for now, Max, Robin, back to you.
Outrageous, folks. Outrageous. You know, you can't even imagine something like this being done to or used on children. It's just like so horrific that this could happen. And you know something, as you could see, they also collected gauze, which showed, I'm sure they could test the blood or the skin cells on the gauze to see exactly which one of the children the gauze and the cayenne pepper and the honey was attached to. Besides this being a gross case of child abuse, it's also assault. And if you cause a physical injury or a serious physical injury, it kicks the charge up that higher. But in itself, the aggravated, I think it's covered in the aggravated child abuse charges that Jodi Hildebrandt is being charged with, as well as Ruby Franke. But it's so hard for me to wrap my head around this because, again, it went on for so long. How was this possible? And just think, Ruby Franke featured this on her YouTube channel. The abuse was live on the screen. Again, I'm not blaming you folks that called in. Many people did call in. Many people did report this. However, it still went on. So what does it take to get something to be done in a case like this? That's what I'm asking. You know, Alan Dershowitz weighed in on this on the Law and Crime channel. I'm going to play a little bit of Alan Dershowitz here.
Also, the author of the new book, Get Trump, The Threat to Our Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law. Professor Dershowitz, welcome back to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Yeah, we always love having you and getting your insight. Your thoughts on this case about Ruby Franke. This is somebody who was on YouTube for years, posting videos of her children. Now she's charged with felony child abuse, along with her business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt, who is a therapist.
It's a very hard defense to make. I mean, the argument has to be that how parents deal with their children, particularly under the local law, is a matter of degree, and that there's a tremendous amount of discretion given to parents as to what the best method of raising their children is. And we don't want the state to go too deeply into family affairs and intrude. On the other hand, obviously, there are the rights of children who can't really defend themselves and can't articulate some claims that they have. And criminal law should never be a matter of degree. It should always be an on-off switch. It should always be a clear line. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who once said that for a criminal law to be valid, it has to be so clear that a reasonable person should be able to understand it if he reads it while running. Imagine the image. He's running, he's reading the law, and he has to be able to understand it. And so the ex post facto law of the Constitution and due process all require clear warning, clear notification. Whenever there are ambiguities, under the principle of lenity, the ambiguities have to be resolved in favor of the defendant. But that's always going to be a matter of degree. And if you have a case where there's clear, obvious, knowing abuse, that defense is less likely to work.
We have allegations here that a child, and maybe even two children, were duct taped at the ankles and wrists. Food and water were withheld as some form of, I don't know if you would call it punishment. I don't know if you find this to be some way of teaching people therapeutically. I can't even imagine any therapist saying, yes, withhold food and water from a child in order to counsel them. These are her children who were found in her business partner.
You know, folks, I just want to say these cases have to be investigated and processed to the same level of an actual homicide investigation. That's how important they are. So investigators must do a thorough job, cross their T's, dot their I's. In the case of evidence, the evidence must be meticulously invoiced, meticulously vouched, meticulously collected, especially the physical evidence like the duct tape. Guess what? Duct tape is very good for collecting fingerprints. Whose fingerprints are on this duct tape? Was it Jodi Hildebrandt? Was it Ruby Franke? Were there hairs belonging to either of these defendants on the duct tape? Also excellent to collect hair and other forensic evidence, right? Whose blood was on the gauze found in the bathroom? The rope that was tied into the children's legs also must be meticulously collected as evidence in this case because it is so important. Then let's get to the other things. Why did they need handcuffs in this home? Apparently there were 2 sets of handcuffs collected in this house. Why did they need them? Good question, right? when you put that whole totality of circumstances together and you question, wait a minute, there was abuse here. This sounds to me like a Washington Heights home invasion kit. And by that, I mean Washington Heights used to be famous where drug dealers would hit the apartments of other drug dealers. And in their kit, they would have duct tape, handcuffs, devices to torture the victims so they would tell them where the drugs were. That's what this seems like. This woman was a therapist, supposedly taking care of children and not doing a very good job, I would add. But again, this case has to be processed with the same meticulousness that you would process the evidence in a homicide. The other thing is there going to be interference in this case? Jodi Hildebrandt was being referred clients by the Jesus Christ Church of the Latter-day Saints. Are they going to be running interference for her, or are they going to be like this? They're going to back away now because, as we say in law enforcement, the shit just hit the fan. And everyone that has any involvement in this is going to run for the exits, all right? But as I said earlier on this show, this case is going to lasso a lot of other people involved in this. And no one's going to just skate away as if this didn't happen.
Partner's home. The police apparently say they have videos of Ruby Franke in the home while this was going on. So I don't understand how anybody could say that duct taping children at the wrists and ankles is anything but abusive, and along with withholding food and water.
Who could have imagined back when I was a kid? I just turned 85.
Could you imagine, any of you guys out there, and I know a lot of you guys in the chat right now are parents, could you imagine withholding food from your children? Can you imagine that? Like, is that like cruel and unusual punishment? Not to mention even the duct taping and the tying them up. Could you imagine withholding food? I can't. I surely can't. I think that's a very cruel punishment.
So we're talking about almost a century ago. Parents would wash out their children's mouths with soap if they said a dirty word. They would beat them up, smack them. I got smacked by my rabbi in Hebrew school for questioning the Torah. Those today are utterly unacceptable. I'm not suggesting that what is alleged here even fits on any continuum. All I'm suggesting is, to the modern eye and ear, things that are clearly abusive would not have seemed abusive back then, which is why you need absolute clarity. Also, there are different cultural norms for how you treat children, different religious groups, different ethnic groups, different ideological groups treat their children somewhat differently. So there is a...
You know, folks, I agree to an extent with Alan Dershowitz, but you know something? There's an old expression: when in Rome, you do as the Romans. So if you live in this country, the United States of America, and you're doing something to your children that may be acceptable, and I'm not going to list any country because I'll be attacked, but in a country where culturally it's permitted in your country, but because our laws are much stricter, well, welcome to the USA, all right? You abide by the laws in the place you are. And again, we've seen the great cultural divide in New York City. There's hundreds of different cultures in New York City. But if parents are allowed a certain amount of, let's say, corporal punishment in their country, which crosses the line in this country, so guess what? You're here and you must abide by the laws in the United States. So Alan Dershowitz, 85-year-old Harvard-trained attorney, there's one thing we disagree on, but that's okay because you're 85 years old and you got that Harvard law degree and you were a professor at Harvard.
Need for the future, at least, there is a need for clear guidance and statutes that say, you know, you can't restrain your children or deny them food. On the other hand, you can deny them dessert. Everybody would acknowledge that. You can deny them a double portion. And so what criminal law doesn't like is matters of degree. And yet, when it comes to issues like this, they're always going to be matters of degree and matters of different attitudes by different groups of people.
There is a religious aspect to this. These are both Mormon women, Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby
Right.
Franke, and we are in no way saying that, you know, the Mormon Church is saying you should be duct taping your children.
course
That's not the point here. However, we do have somebody, Ruby Franke, who seems to claim that she is a devout Mormon who is concerned about things going on in the lives of her children that could be viewed as sinful. And possibly she goes to Jodi Hildebrandt for help because she's a licensed counselor. And the counselor says, well, this is what we need to do. This is what needs to be done to cure these ills, whatever they may be. We still don't know what the alleged transgressions were. So is it possible, her lawyer says, she was under the spell of this woman who claimed to be a therapist and was trying to do what was best for her children because she believed something was going on with them that was harmful?
You know something? That 100%, and Anjanette Levy predicted it right there, is going to be the defense of Ruby Franke. She is 100% going to blame this entirely on Jodi Hildebrandt and claiming exactly what Anjanette Levy said, is that she's going to claim to have been under the spell of Jodi Hildebrandt and therefore did whatever she was told. In fact, she may even extend it to the religion, that she was under some cultish type rule, type bias, some cultish thing that had her in her grip. And again, the proof, let's expand this case outward. The proof that there is religious involvement in this case, and I'm sure there's more proof than I even know of right now, but the big proof is that Jodi Hildebrandt was being forwarded clients from the church. She was being referred clients. That must mean that they liked the way she was working, that they liked the results she was getting, that they liked what she was teaching these people. So yes, I agree 100% that the defense for Ruby Franke is going to be 100% to blame it on the spell that she was put under by Jodi Hildebrandt. It seems like it's a little bit of a pattern here, doesn't it? Doesn't Ruby Franke also blame her husband, who she banished from the home 14 months ago with the assistance, of course, of Jodi Hildebrandt? Sound familiar? Is it consistent with someone blaming everyone else for Christine Hathaway Coley? Just because there's been a time when these punishments were allowed, and we're referring to corporal punishment, there has to be a reason they were changed, because they were and they are abuse. You know something, Christine, I agree with you to a certain extent, but I also think parents have a right to a certain level of corporal punishment on their children. And I don't mean to give him a beating where, you know, medical attention is required, but to get their point across. And I think that parents in that level, in that way, have to be allowed to be parents. But when it crosses the line to this level of abuse, then I 100% agree with you, Christine. And thank you for your comments. Cheryl, good to see you. All you folks in the chat, thank you for joining me at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very nice to see all you guys are around. It's Fire Opal. Schmitty, I hope they sit them in a hot yard attached to the ground by handcuffs. Let them, must be talking about Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. It's amazing that the emotion that this triggers in, and it's not amazing, it's predictable. The emotion it elicits in adults that see this, and no one on this earth wants to see children abused.
Look, this is a variation of advice of counsel defense. What she's claiming is advice of therapist. defense or advice of religious leaders defense. Let's not forget how old the notion of spare the rod and spoil the child, or under the law of the Bible, if a child reaches a certain level of disobedience, the child could be stoned. That's in the Bible. Nobody accepts that today, but it'd be interesting to see how a jury in this part of the country reacts to the claim of advice of counselor, advice of religious leaders, advice of friends. It's very likely the jury will find that, notwithstanding any of those defenses, this went too far. But remember, the state has to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, and all they need is one juror to have a reasonable doubt, and you have a hung jury.
We've seen some reporting in the Salt Lake City Tribune that there were neighbors who said they contacted Children's Services about this. They were very concerned about potential harm that the children were enduring at the hands of Ruby Franke. And these neighbors told the reporter at the Tribune that they felt like their complaints were ignored or fell on deaf ears. And
folks, there is no doubt that that people did make complaints, that the police had responded to this home on numerous occasions. So, yes, does there need to be an investigation on that? I think so. Or what happened to the report that I made? What happened to when I reported this abuse, so long ago? What happened? What was the results of the report? I remember I covered this case on another night, and the elder daughter of Ruby Franke called up and reported that her siblings were left alone, without food, without anything. And the police responded to the home, and they verified, yes, they were alone, but they would not open the door, probably as instructed by Ruby Franke. And to my amazement, the police left. They left without doing anything. As you guys know, I was an NYPD sergeant for 22 years of my 27 years on the NYPD. And one of the biggest jobs I would ever go to was a report of suspected child abuse. And the term that covered us, and what do I mean covered us? Protected us legally for doing the right thing, was the term imminent danger. If you, as a sergeant for the NYPD or a lieutenant or a captain, determined that the location that you responded to, there are children inside, and I feared there was imminent danger to their life, to their well-being. And because of that imminent danger, I made a decision to knock the door down, to boom the door, I used to call it, right? Can you do that without a search warrant? You bet you can. Yes, you can, if there's imminent danger. So, Sergeant Cannon, NYPD, this home, I just got a call from the sibling who's a junior at BYU. Of course, I'm not going to be in Utah doing this, but say the same exact case occurred in New York City, and I was called and they said, the kids are left alone. They have no food. They're left to their own devices. They're 12 and 10. You bet I'm booming that door. I'm taking that door down, and I'm going to take the kids and I'm going to give them to DCFS, Division of Children and Family Services. Now I know what it's called in Utah. In New York City, it's called CPS, Child Protective Services. And it seems every few years they change the name of that. And once you remove the children, in Utah, they go to the Division of Child and Family Services. The parents are not getting those kids back until they go to family court, and a family court judge determines that, okay, they're no longer in imminent danger. Charlotte Bassett, anyone involved with the church has been running like cockroaches. Anyone knew or thought anything was wrong and didn't do anything, shame on you. I have honey and cayenne pepper for you. I am LDS. Okay. So you're speaking out, and I applaud that. And I hope more people speak out and more people say there's a problem. And there's not a problem just in this religion. There's a problem in lots of religions that like to keep things, even crimes. Oh, let's handle this in-house. Guess what? No, there is no handling crimes in-house. I can say this, and it's going on a lot of deaf ears because many religions will still keep doing it. They'll keep, let's handle this in-house. We'll take care of this. There's a crime inside a family. We're better off mediating this than having an arrest made and having the law arrest someone and prosecute someone. First of all, religious leader, that's not your call, all right? Once it crosses the level of a crime, right? And what is a crime? Let's define a crime. Very easy. When I used to teach criminal justice, what is a crime? A crime is a misdemeanor or a felony. That's it. That's the answer. You got that question right on the exam, all right? What's a felony? A felony is a crime where you can do more than a year in prison. That more than, MT. What's a misdemeanor? A misdemeanor is a crime that you can do less than a year in jail, because prison is designed to hold people, incarcerate people for more than a year. Jail is a facility that's meant to incarcerate someone for less than, okay? So we learned two things today. We learned what a crime is and what a misdemeanor and a felony is. So religious leaders, bishops, priests, rabbis, elders, whatever you want to call them in your church, they're not allowed to mediate crimes. They do it all the time, right? But that's not their job. The job is for the police to investigate it. Leila Decada, precisely, medical grade being the operative words, and even that isn't commonly used when pharmaceutical alternatives are available. Moreover, treating the wounds they caused, audacity. Lilia, is it Lilia? Lilia, that's a pretty name. I don't know who you were responding to, but the church liked the 10% tithing Jodi was paying them off for her millions, period. Well, it seemed like it was a two-way street, because the church was referring clients to Jodi Hildebrandt. That 9/11 call from the neighbor told me everything. The despair in the neighbor's voice is heartbreaking, praying these children remain safe and loved from this point forward. I 100% agree. You know, there was also something that was described as a panic room, which I found pretty horrific. Well, play this here.
Secluded Ivins, Utah neighborhood where Ruby Franke's 12-year-old emaciated son broke free. But when first responders arrived on the scene, inside this home, they found a panic room.
He says it's a large room. It's a panic room.
A shocking revelation made by first responders who were called to Jodi Hildebrandt's home back in August. After a young boy escaped from the home and ran to a neighbor for help, investigators found a panic room inside.
Hey, LT, there's a panic room inside the garage. Downstairs, underneath the garage.
Radio recordings from the Santa Clara-Ivins Police Department captured the dramatic moments when the room is discovered.
He says it's a large room. It's a panic room.
First responders were called to the home in southern Utah on August 30th after a harrowing 911 call.
You know, folks, someone reminded me, and I know this, but someone reminded me that a panic room can also be a safe room, and a safe room designed to protect the occupants from a possible home invasion. So you could lock yourself in the room And while in that room, no one could enter because it's got the door of like a bank safe on it. So the panic room could also be a safe room. So that's unclear as to, was this used for some nefarious reason in regards to the children, or was this a safe room? We don't know for sure.
Came into police.
This kid has obviously been, I think he's been detained.
This 911 call is just so sad. Every time I hear it, I just get, you want to cry. You really want to, because obviously this neighbor was brought to tears by this and the condition of the 12-year-old boy.
He's obviously covered in wounds.
The caller told first responders a 12-year-old boy arrived at his front door, emaciated and asking for food and water. Investigators later determined the boy was the son of Ruby Franke, the YouTuber mom who became popular from her 8 passengers YouTube page. For a time, Franke documented the lives of her family, including her husband, Kevin, and 6 children, to the more than 2 million subscribers. Her YouTube page has since been deactivated.
Eve has been amazingly well behaved for being in town.
But
for
you yelled at me.
Shh. The fact that I yell at my kids is a secret.
She seems so, I played this morning in a short video. She just seems so evil in that. I'm going to play it back again. And she just seems so, oh my God. Just watch her, what she says here.
The fact that I yell at my kids is a secret. We don't want our viewers to know. That never happens in my house.
She has like a demonic face. I don't know if you guys agree, but just watch it again. It's like demonic.
That never happens in my house. I never yell.
Investigators say Franke's 12-year-old was found emaciated last month with open wounds and duct tape around his wrists and ankles. They say he crawled out of a window of this home owned by Jodi Hildebrandt, Ruby Franke's business partner.
Our whole life's goal is to make our kids happy. And most of the time we're trying to make our kids happy. What we're actually doing is being in distortion and inviting them into a controlling dynamic.
Both Hildebrandt.
I don't want any therapist that uses controlling dynamic or words of that nature to treat anyone. Just that I've never heard those terms used before by any therapist. And controlling dynamic, wow.
Hildebrandt and Franke were arrested and eventually charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse each. They were set to appear at a bail hearing this week, but hours before the hearing, it was continued. Right now, they're still being held in the Washington County Jail in southern Utah. In all, 4 of Franke's children were taken to the Department of Child and Family Services after the 12-year-old escaped. Per the recording of first responder audio, it's possible the other children were being held in the panic room.
Temple, we've got it, but we can't get into it. My guess is that would be where they're at.
First responders say a large Fort Knox vault door led to the room with a...
Look at that. Now, that to me just, it's scary. That's the panic room. It's not a safe room. It's a panic room. Very scary.
Wheel on the front.
Yeah, he says it's downstairs and it's underneath one of the garages, and he's calling it a safe room. He said something about Fort Knox, so I don't know if it has a Fort Knox door or safe on it, but that's what he's talking about. This one says Liberty Safe Company. It's got a big wheel on the front.
Law and Crime Network reached out to the Santa Clara-Ivins Police Department for more information about the rescue and that panic room, but we're told that no new information or details could be released as the investigation is still ongoing. Reporting in Ivins, Utah, Sierra Gillespie, Law and Crime Network.
Folks, your feelings. What do you think? Is that scary? Is that not scary that this person who already we know about the duct tape, we know about the handcuffs, we know about how she withholds food from children, and now she's got a panic room that she puts children in. Very, very scary, I think, that panic room. that she puts children in. I don't know what to say. I mean, that's why I think this this whole caper. Wendy Whitney, thank you for the 199 super sticker. Very much appreciated. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you want to support us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. We also have our YouTube channel members, which we have 5 different levels. And I appreciate all you YouTube. You see the folks who are YouTube channel members by the green font. And they're our friends, our subscribers, and our fans. Sometimes I use the word fan, and people don't call us fans. Well, I think that should be a badge of honor to be our fans. To me, it is anyway. I hope it is to you. Amy York, both Kevin and Ruby's attorneys is using that as a defense that they did whatever Jodi said. I'm sorry, but if they are that dim in regards to parenting, they should not be parents. Amy York, you know something? I happen to 100% agree with you that, especially, I don't see how the husband Kevin can say that he has no culpability in this. He was involved up until 14 months ago. So how does he not have any culpability? And again, I think he's gonna have a problem down the road because I think he's going to have to explain his culpability in this case.
How could you not know? How could you spend this much time without speaking to your kids? What does he have to say about that?
He was following the advice of who he thought was a professional mental health expert, telling him to stay away. The only way to save his family.
This is the attorney for Kevin Franke talking about, of course, basically excuses for Kevin Franke.
Family was to stay apart from his family at that point, while he thought they were working toward reconciliation. He had no idea that there was this kind of abuse going on. She was telling him that everything was blissful and everything was wonderful. That in conjunction with the fact she didn't tell him that she had taken the kids to Southern Utah to be in Jodi's home. He would have resisted that, but she didn't tell him. He was being advised by his mental health care professional to stay away from the family and not contact the kids.
Kester does say before his wife's arrest, Kevin Franke received counseling from Hildebrandt.
During the separation, Kevin was attending men's groups that were facilitated by Jodi. And during those groups, he was being downgraded and diminished and told how bad he was and that he needed to repent, and that the best way to repent was to not infect his family with his problems. And, so that's why you need to stay away. He wasn't the only one in those men's groups that was undergoing exactly what he was undergoing at her suggestion and recommendation.
Just so I get a better idea of what these men groups are, would that be, what would that entail? They're going to like a group and kind of talking about things. Who are the people who are kind of like laying down the law, so to speak?
Jodi. And they were Zoom meetings. I don't think they ever met together personally, even though maybe a sponsor of someone would meet personally, but sporadically.
Kester says because of this counseling, Kevin Franke believed his relationship was on the road to recovery.
They were working toward reconciliation. There was no separate maintenance documents. There was no divorce filed because he was being led to believe they were working toward reconciliation. He wanted to be back with his family. He wanted to be back with his wife, but was being told by Jodi and by Ruby that in order to repair all this, you need to stay away. And was being told that, hey, with you away, everything's blissful. The kids are doing well. Everything's just great.
On Monday.
Schmitty, thank you so much for the $5 super sticker. Well, we know the Fort Knox door was put on for a reason. This is not a panic safe room. I feel like it's a torture chamber, vault, room of doom. Schmitty, it's scary to think that, but I think that potentially you could be right. And that's very scary to think that at all. Fuzzy Doxy, thank you so much for the super sticker. Folks, my opinion, though, in regards to this attorney, I could see what the attorneys are planning right now. And they're all, whether it's Kevin Franke or Ruby Franke, what their defense plan is to blame everything on Jodi Hildebrandt. Yeah. Good defense, right? Do you think, first of all, do you think a jury would believe that in regards? Let's say Ruby Franke. You think they're going to believe that Jodi Hildebrandt had Ruby Franke under her spell? She couldn't think for herself. She did whatever Jodi Hildebrandt told her to do. You know, perhaps because of the outrageousness of this, maybe a jury would believe that. Maybe they'll show up past cases of or past people who Jodi Hildebrandt has counseled. And they'll all testify to what a monster she is. So is there a possibility that they may believe that? This gentleman here, Adam Steed, he totally thinks that Jodi Hildebrandt destroyed his marriage, destroyed his life. And he's ready to testify. He's going on all the stations, all the TV stations, making his rounds and telling all about Jodi Hildebrandt. So is there a possibility then that a jury, when Ruby Franke comes forth and blames all of her ills, all of the things that occurred to her and her family, you think they'll believe her? Juries can do strange things, right? But do you believe her? Do you believe that Ruby Franke was hypnotized, was held in the clutches of Jodi Hildebrandt? How about Kevin Franke? What's his excuse? He was controlled, or he was just a victim of Jodi Hildebrandt? These are going to be the legal issues in this case.
Monday, both Ruby Franke and Hildebrandt were set to appear in Washington County Court for a status hearing discussing bail. Law and Crime Network was at the courthouse when attorneys filed a motion to delay the hearing. Kester tells us the hearing was pushed because attorneys received new and crucial information from law enforcement, but couldn't give us the specifics. He also says his client isn't quite ready to speak publicly.
And when you and I had texted previously, I asked whether Kevin wants to speak, and your reply was interesting to me in that you said Kevin does want to speak, just not now.
Correct.
So if not now, when?
When the dust has kind of settled. He just doesn't want to jeopardize. He doesn't want to say something because we've.
You know, folks, this attorney's not saying it because he means when the dust settles. He doesn't know yet if Kevin Franke will be indicted for a crime himself. After all, he was on all these videos up until 14 months ago. So he's waiting, although potentially, I said this the other night, Kevin Franke may be grabbed by the district attorney. For what reason? They may grab him and say, will you testify against your wife? Will you testify against Jodi Hildebrandt? If you do, we'll cut you a deal. We won't charge you. But if you don't, you're getting charged. What do you think he'll do? Do you think he'll testify against his wife? Do you think he'll testify against Jodi Hildebrandt? First of all, he'll, of course, testify against Jodi Hildebrandt. But will he testify against his wife? That's a big question. I don't know, But this attorney, again, he's an attorney, and he's going to say things that totally exonerate Kevin Franke, of course. But when you look at the big picture, Kevin Franke's involved in this, and he potentially could be charged.
Committed to the court. We're not going to disparage any of the family. And Kevin's gone above and beyond that. He's not only not disparaged anyone, he's reaching out to try to bring this family closer together and to kind of heal wounds.
Kay, the geeky angel, what a great observation. 100%. Defense attorneys want them to stay in jail. Not a good sign. 100% correct. I was going to bring that up, but you brought it up first, and thank you for doing that. You're 100% correct. Why would a defense attorney for Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt want them to stay in jail right now? Wow. What defense attorney wants his client to stay in jail? There's a good reason for it, right? Because when Ruby Franke gets out, what's one of the things she's going to want to do? She's going to want to visit her children. What will the judge say? No. I preclude you. In fact, I have an order of protection. You're not allowed to see your children. How does that look? How does that look? Jodi Hildebrandt? First of all, I can't even imagine. I think her bail will be in the 7 figures, perhaps. Or maybe they'll just say, oh, she's not a threat to the community. She's not a risk factor to flee the jurisdiction. Well, I think she is a danger to the community, And I think if anyone had a reason to flee the jurisdiction, it's her, because this case against her and Ruby Franke is extremely, extremely strong. And so, Kay, the geeky angel, thank you for that comment. You're 100% right. Schmitty, sorry for even thinking it, but for real, this gives me the goosebumps. I don't feel that room was for the safety of the children, more for them to use in a panic. Wonder what they found there. Schmitty, we don't know. They didn't publish that. Great day in mom. Both Ruby and Jodi are disgusting. I have beautiful, loving friends that are LDS. Kevin is involved. Well, yes, Great Dane mom. I'm putting that out there myself, 100%. Lalila Decada, absolutely not. As someone who was raised Mormon, the thought process when you are taught obedience above all else and not taught critical thinking, that's scary that you're not taught critical thinking, because when you get out of that community, if you're not taught to critically think, how are you going to survive in this world? This whole world is not Utah, right? RDNAC, Jodi has a lot of power over there and has ruined people's lives and reputations, according to her niece, who was also abused by her. 100% RDNAC. Jenny in Georgia. Bill, I think this attorney knows Kevin is complicit. He won't say it. No, 100%, Jenny. You got to realize attorneys say they're trained to speak the way they do speak, to preclude their client from perhaps Lalila, as Voltaire said, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Critical thinking is discouraged in this community, speaking from personal experience. Lalila, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. You're very articulate, and I appreciate your comments from someone who's in this community. And not all of us are in this community, but we can read into it based on what we're seeing. Marianne Knapp, where were the grandparents and relatives at this time? Something I don't know. However, many times the grandparents are involved in this too. It's like a whole big cult, So I don't know where they were. But again, why do you think that would have been helpful? Would they have been helpful? K-Bay, I hope the children say they don't want to be near her. Yeah, let's hope. Martha Miner, the rule: spare the rod, spoil the child is abused and taken out of context. Yeah, this was a lot more than that. This was out and out, just absolute abuse. Nothing that we could defend in this. MC's audio, a case like this goes to show looks are deceiving. Mike, 100% correct. When people think of abuse, they think, oh, they're a poor family. Oh, they're uneducated. This is neither that. It's both the opposite. They're an affluent family and they're educated. So what happened there? Maybe we have built-in prejudices that tell us that. Wendy Whitney, such a classic example of if you see something, say something. but follow through until something's done. Don't give up until you reach someone acts. 100% Wendy Whitney. LinkedIn user, Kevin is complicit and they should not cut any deal with him. I believe he's 100% complicit. And you know something? This case is just at the very, very beginning, you know. And as I said, what Kevin is going to be looking for, I realize I said that very New Yorker-esque, looking. I said looking. What he's going to be looking for is a deal, because he needs to get a deal, because he's up to his ass in this, you know. Craftology. So definitely not defending Jodi and Ruby, but cayenne pepper is known to soothe inflamed tissue. A pinch of cayenne pepper in water with honey and lemon works wonders for a sore throat. Just FYI. I appreciate that. I've never, in my law enforcement career, I've never gone to a location where someone used that to treat a cut. Lalila, I'm going to read your comment again. You're hitting 1,000, batting 1,000. I came here for Grandpa Bill. Both of my grandfathers were deceased before I was born, and your wisdom and experience is so helpful, even when I totally disagree. Not in this case, but occasionally. Lalila, you know something? I'm one of those people that will freely admit that I make mistakes. I'm not right all the time. But my opinion is what is my opinion. And luckily, most of the time, it's based on somewhat knowledge and experience and education, hopefully, but opinions too. Everyone has one, and you're not always correct. So, Patricia Sebald, Bill, yes, it's beyond scary and has brought me to tears. Yeah, it's, and again, this is just the very beginning, you know. This is the very beginning of this case. So let's play a little bit of more of this attorney, then we'll move.
And so in terms of him speaking out, I think he wants to accomplish the objective that he wants to get his family back together. But I think at some point he'll want to tell the whole story. I just don't think this is the time to declare war. And he and I have counseled, and we believe that this is a time for healing. A lot of bad things have happened to this family, and he values his family and he values his children above all. And he's committed to doing whatever it takes, even if it's him remaining silent. He's committed to doing that in order to make the future better for his children.
Meanwhile, Kevin Franke is fighting for custody of his children through a series of juvenile hearings in north central Utah. Kester tells us those hearings may not remain public for long.
It's pretty much.
Folks, do you think that a judge, a family court judge, at this point would give custody to Kevin Franke? I tell you what, I think not. Again, as we just discussed, he has some involvement here. He has some culpability. You know, what judge would say, "Oh yes, give the children to Kevin Franke. He's totally cleared." No judge can say that right now. So I think he can attend these hearings, but what family court judge would say, "Okay, yeah, let's release the children to the father who's been out of their lives for 14 months, but before that was as involved in these horrific YouTube videos that showed abuse right in the videos. So let's bring him back. Let's give the kids to him." I do not think so. I do not think that that's a possibility. You know, this video just shows the many other times that the police responded to this home. And again, what happened to those times? What happened after they responded?
Police and some of the podcasts she and her business partner have already produced.
And Daniel Woodruff joining us live in Utah County with that part of the story tonight. Daniel?
Yeah, the 8 Passengers YouTube channel has been removed, but podcasts featuring both Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt are still online. We listened to them today, some of them, and found episode after episode featuring advice about parenting and children.
You're the mother and she is the child. This is not a relationship where you trust her. That's not your job as a mother. In fact, your job as a mother is to constantly be scrutinizing her, to constantly be judging her choices against principles.
That's Ruby Franke speaking on a podcast late last year for Connections, a life coaching platform founded by her business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt. Both women are now charged with aggravated child abuse. Franke became famous on the YouTube channel 8 Passengers. 2 News has been looking into past interactions she had with police. Records show law enforcement received more than a dozen calls to 2 homes over several years, but Springville police told 2 News incident reports were not created for a majority of them. Some of those calls Ruby Franke made herself, reporting she was being harassed. But in September 2022, her oldest daughter called police, worried about her siblings, who she said had been left at home alone for days. Police responded and said they saw the kids through the windows, but they wouldn't answer the door.
That was the case that I was referring to before, that the police saw the kids through the door. They had been left there for several days alone, and the police left. That would never, if I did that in New York City, believe me, there would be severe consequences. You cannot leave till you correct the situation. How did the police correct the situation? They corrected nothing. They left. What if the kids died after they left? Who answers for that? To me, that was an outrageous police response.
They also said neighbors outside expressed concern about the children and that they would contact the Utah Division of Child and Family Services. Now, I did reach out today to one of those neighbors who was named chiefly in that complaint from last September, but I have not heard back from her yet. I also reached out today to DCFS, but haven't heard anything from them either at this point. Live in Utah County, Daniel.
So, guys, that's pretty amazing, right? That there had been numerous reports. The police had responded, but nothing was done. So they responded to the location, and even though they had a credible report that abuse was going on, they just pulled away and left. Like, again, was there follow-up investigations on these responses? I guess not. In New York City, believe me, the only people, well, I shouldn't say the only, but the people held to the highest level of accountability in New York City, in my opinion, because I know I could get attacked for saying this, are the police. You don't do something, believe me, there's agencies coming down on you. What did you do, Sergeant? Why did you do that, Sergeant? Why did you not do this, Sergeant? Why did you do that? So there's accountability. So I don't understand how they just left and didn't take any action. And when there was a complainant, the sister Shari called and said, "My brothers and sisters have been left for days. There's no one taking care of them. They have no food. They have nothing." Folks, if you're looking for a great defense attorney in the New York City metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired member of the service, a retired NYPD police officer, and a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe on his cell at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Joe is not just a great defense attorney, but a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast, and we so appreciate all that Joe does for us. Folks, I'm going to show you one last video here, and it's about from the thoughts of Ruby Franke's husband on how he talks about how Jodi Hildebrandt manipulated the family.
In conjunction with Ruby, that she's been kind of the spearhead toward essentially destroying his life and destroying his family.
How did Jodi and Ruby get connected? Does Kevin know?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Is Kevin believing that perhaps it was Jodi who was manipulating Ruby in this? Or because it also sounds like Kevin feels he was manipulated by Ruby. Is it just all the blame on Jodi?
I think it was a team effort, but with Jodi being the spearhead and creating a situation that's just caused all of this destruction of his family.
Why does he believe that Jodi is manipulative? What makes him believe that?
Probably shouldn't go into that, but we recently reviewed on another website an interview with Jodi's niece, who described to the public exactly what she had done, what Jodi had done to the niece and her family, and we're hearing other information that she's done this to a number of families. And it wasn't until this all came to light that Kevin came to realize that his family had also been victimized by Jodi.
Have the authorities reached out to your client?
Oh, certainly. He's interviewed with them.
And they see him as a potential witness?
They haven't said that. He was interviewed with them the day this all occurred.
So, folks, that's just really going over what the attorney is saying. Of course, Kevin has taken really no culpability here. It's all Ruby and it's all Jodi Hildebrandt. And now, as this case proceeds, we'll keep you updated. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in this early evening, actually, just 6 p.m. we went live. And I appreciate the interaction with the chat and some really smart people in the chat. And there's some people from Utah. And that I appreciate even more than anything else, because you can bring the perspective of someone who actually lives in that area. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thank you so much for listening tonight. Have a great rest of your night, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.